Egyptian zodiac, or the sign of the zodiac, or mentors according to the Egyptian zodiac. Each of those gods were assigned to look after a certain group of people, and now is the turn of the Horus, god of the heavens and the living. Horus born between August 16, September 15. The planet would be Mercury, is the planet, the mental, intellectual planet, and the color would be brown. And here is Horus fighting with Anubis. I like Anubis though. I don't know why. I also love this character. I still believe that this is a single entity that can multiply itself into many. But I love the swings. I love this avatar. I love this one. I'm very, I don't know, I'm very attracted to it. So let's see. They are the symbol of obedience and respect. I'm on the 15th of September, and no, I'm not very obedient. Depends, will depend. And I do respect, but not things that I see as wrong. I do not respect wrongdoings or bad character people. Refer to monks or hermits. The children of Horus are sincere and of great strength. That's true, very sincere and of great strength. Unconditional, yeah. Give thanks and want nothing in return. And straightforward, yeah. Blunt and straightforward, which is why they can appear harsh, yeah. They love pleasure and funny. I would say, um, amusement park, beaches, adventures in nature, but without excess. Yeah, that's true. They don't like conflict and try to escape any controversial situation. Not always. Sometimes they are pacifists, yeah, by nature, and prefer to go unnoticed. That's true. They are willing to help those in need. True, very true. Even assuming they are going against their own interests. Yeah, that's true. A sacrifice. They are excellent workers and are not afraid of the hard work. That's true. Have many administrative qualities. Yeah, can be dissolute, but also generous to those in need. Yeah, that's true. In love, they love intensely and show their emotions. Dedicate themselves completely to family and partner, even at the cost of setting aside their ambitions. I wish it wasn't like this. I think sometimes we are forced to, not because we want to. Their mission is to heal and help others. That's true, both in health and monetary matters. But they need to learn to overcome fears and insecurities. I don't have fears anymore. It depends on the age group. But as they grow older, they matches, they 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 eliminated this from them. So let's see. Horus is the name of a sky god in ancient Egyptian mythology, which designates primarily two deities: Horus the elder, or Horus the great, the last born of the first five original gods, and Horus the younger, the son of Osiris and Isis. According to the historian Jimmy Dunn, Horus is the most important of the avian deities. And who wants Kobasa? Kobasa was the albine um, falcon dragon, who takes on so many forms and is depicted so differently in various inscriptions that it is nearly impossible to distinguish the true. I think that they go into metaphors, they kind of shapeshift to distinguish the true Horus. Horus is mostly a general term for a great number of falcon deities. Oh, I see that. So there's many of them, and maybe Enlil is one of them. Enlil is depicted as the falcon god. You see, there's certain political parties and certain um, countries' flag emblem, which has an eagle as a symbol, and it depicts Horus or Enlil. Horus is mostly so. While this is certainly true, the name Horus will usually be found to designate either the older god of the first five or the son of Isis and Osiris, who defeated his uncle Seth and restored order to the land. The name Horus is the Latin version of the Egyptian Hor, 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 which means the distant one, a reference to his role as a sky god. The elder Horus, brother of Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, is known as Horus the Great in English, or Haruah and Harueris in Egyptian. The son of Osiris and Isis is known as the Horus the Child, Horpakere, who was transformed into the Greek god Harpocrates after Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, I guess that he wore a helmet with an eagle, conquered Egypt in 331 BCE. Harpocrates also means Horus the Child, and Hippocrates was the physician. But the deity differed from the Egyptian Horus. Hippocrates was the Greek god of silencing and confidentiality, the keeper of secrets, whose statuary regularly depicts him as a winged child with his finger to his lips. Horus the Younger, on the other hand, was a powerful sky god associated with the sun, primarily, but also the moon. He was the protector of the royalty of Egypt, avenger of wrongs, defender of order, uniter of the two lands, and based on his battles with Seth, a god of war regularly evoked by Egyptians rulers before battle and praised afterwards. In time, he became combined with the sun god Ra to form a new deity. Ra is the sun god of the sign of Leo. Ra Haraket, god of the sun, who sailed across the sky during the day and was depicted as a falcon-headed man wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt with the sun disconnected. So Ra and Horus could be the same entity. His symbols are the Eye of Horus, one of the most famous Egyptian symbols, and the falcon. Could it also be the symbol of the Masons? The one-eyed Horus, could it be? The elder Horus is one of the oldest gods of Egypt, born of the union between Geb, Earth, and Nut, sky, shortly after the creation of the world. His older brother Osiris was given the responsibility of governing the earth along with Isis, while Horus was given charge of the sky and specifically the sun. In another version of the story, Horus is the son of Hathor, while in others she is his wife, and sometimes she is mother, wife, and daughter of Horus. So what also complicated. The scholar Geraldine Pinch notes that one of the earliest divine images known from Egypt is that of a falcon and a bark, representing Horus in the sun barge traveling across the heavens. Horus is also depicted as a creator god and benevolent protector. Let's see. There were many falcon gods known as avian deities in Egyptian religion who were eventually absorbed into the god known as Horus. Some, such as Dunawi from Upper Egypt, appear early in history, while others, like Montu, were popular later. Horus' early association with Dunawi has been challenged by scholars, but there is no doubt he was later combined with the god as Horus Anubis. Dunawi was a local god of the 18th Upper Nome province, while Horus was widely worshipped through the country. It's possible that, like Inanna in Mesopotamia, the figure of Horus began as a local god, such as Dunawi, but it seems more likely that Horus was fully realized early in Egypt's religion's development. Egyptologist Richard H. Wilson comments on how Horus was one of the earliest of Egyptian deities. His name is attested from the beginning of the dynastic period, and it is probably probable that early falcon deities such as that shows restraint. The marsh dwellers on the Nama palette represent the same god rulers of the pre-dynastic period in Egypt were known as followers of Horus, which attests to an even earlier point of veneration in Egypt history. In his role as the distant one, he performs the same task as the distant goddess, a function associated with Hathor and a number of other female deities who go forth from Ra and return bringing transformation. The sun was the moon, and the moon were considered Horus' eyes as he watched over the people of the world day and night, but could also draw near to them in times of trouble or doubt. Imagine it as a falcon. He could fly far away from Ra and return with vital information, and in the same way could quickly bring comfort to those in need. So he's a benevolent god and a semi Anunnaki god, whatever. And that's the zodiacal sign of Virgo and Leo. From the early dynastic period onwards, Horus was linked with the king of Egypt through later rulers associated themselves with Horus the Younger. Historian Margaret Bunson writes, the Serek, the earliest of the king's symbols, depicted a falcon or hawk on a perch. As a result, devotion to Horus spread throughout Egypt, but in various locales, the forms, traditions, and rituals honoring the gods varied greatly. This variation gave rise to a number of different epithets and roles for this deity and eventually led to his transformation from the elder Horus to the child of Osiris and Isis. I think it's the same thing. Horus the younger in the Osiris myth. The younger Horus is sometimes mentioned as related to the older god, but quickly eclipsed him and assumed it many of his characteristics is the same entity. By the time of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the last dynasty to rule Egypt, the elder Horus had been completely replaced by the younger. Statues of Horus the child from the Ptolemaic period show him as a young boy with his finger to his lips, perhaps representing the time when he had to remain quiet when hiding from his uncle Seth as a child. In his young form, he came to represent a promise by the gods to take care of suffering humanity, since he had himself suffered as a as in child as a child, and he knew how it felt to be fragile and surrounded by dangers. It was this form of Horus who would become the Greek Hippocrates, whom Plutarch called the second son of Isis, and who would go on to become popular in the Roman world. The cult of Isis was the most popular mystery cult in Rome, greatly influencing the development of Christianity, and Hippocrates was the divine son depicted in ancient Roman art with his mother. The story of Horus comes out of the Osiris myth, which was one of the most popular in ancient Egypt and gave rise to the cult of Isis. This story began shortly after the creation of the world, when Osiris and Isis ruled over paradise they created. When a man and a woman were born from the tears of a tomb, Ra, they were uncivilized and barbaric. Osiris taught them culture, religious observances to honor the gods, and the art of agriculture. Osiris and Kia. So Horus is his son, or a part of him that became the son. The people were all equal at this time, men and women, owing to the gifts of Isis which were dispensed to all. Food was plentiful, and there was no want or need unfulfilled. Osiris' brother said, so how come the world becoming this mess today? Osiris' brother Seth grew jealous of him, and this envy turned to hatred when Seth discovered that his wife, Nephthys, had transformed herself into the likeness of Isis and seduced Osiris. Seth was not angry with Nephthys, however, but focused his revenge on his brother, the beautiful one, who had presented a temptation too strong for Nephthys to resist. Seth tricked Osiris into laying down in a casket he had made to his brother's exact specification of size, the dimensions, and once Osiris was inside, Seth slammed the lid on and threw the box into the Nile. The casket floated down the river to eventually lodge in a tamarisk tree by the shores of Byblos, where The kings and queen admired his beauty and sweetest scent and had cut it down for a pillar in their court. While this was going on, Seth had usurped Osiris' rule and reigned over the land with iniquities. He neglected the gifts which Osiris and Isis had bequeathed, and the land suffered drought and famine. Isis knew she had to bring Osiris back from wherever Seth had banished him to and went out searching for him. She finally found him inside the tree pillar at the Bibles, asked the king and queen for it, and brought it back to Egypt. Osiris was dead but Isis knew she could bring him back to life. She asked the Hethitian Nephthys to stand guard over the body and protect it from Seth while she went to gather herbs or potions. Seth meanwhile had heard that his brother had returned and went out to look for him. He found Nephthys and tricked her into telling him where the body was hidden. Then he hacked Osiris into pieces and scattered the body parts across the land and into the Nile. When Isis came back, she was horrified to find her husband's body missing. Nephthys told her how she had been tricked and what Seth had done to Osiris. The two sisters then went into search of the body parts and reassembled Osiris. His penis had been eaten by a fish, and so he was incomplete, but Isis could still return him to life. Isis used her magic and potion, and in some versions of the story is aided in this by Nephthys. Osiris revived but could no longer rule among the living because he was no longer whole. He would have to descend to the underworld and reigns there as Lord of the Dead. Prior to his departure, though, Isis transformed herself into a kite, a falcon, and flew around his body, drawing his seed into her own and becoming pregnant with Horus. Osiris left for the underworld, and Isis went into hiding into the delta region of Egypt to protect herself and her son from Seth. Horus and Isis. Isis endured a difficult pregnancy with exceptionally long labor and gave birth to Horus alone in the swamps of the delta. She hid herself and her son from Seth and his demons in the thickest thickets, only going out at night for food accompanied by a bodyguard of 7 scorpions who were given her by the goddess Selket. Selket, and in some versions of the story, Deity, watched over Horus while Isis went out. Isis, Selket, and Deity nurtured Horus and educated him in the exile until he was grown to manhood and was strong enough to challenge his uncle for his father's kingdom. The story of the battle between Horus and Seth had many different versions, but the best known is from a manuscript dated to 20th century dynasty, which described their contests as a legal trials in front of the Enid, a tribunal of 9 powerful gods. In this version of the story, Horus brings a complaint against Seth, who is one of the 9, claiming he has unlawfully taken the throne from Osiris, who is also one of the 9 judges. The tribunal is asked to decide between Horus and Seth, and most of the gods choose Horus, but Ra, the supreme god, claims that Horus is too young and inexperienced, and Set had the better claim to rule. Horus and Set must compete in a series of battles to prove which is best able to reign. In the course of these battles, Horus loses an eye and Set is castrated, or at least severely damaged. But Horus is victorious each time. So Set is in key, the Lucifer, and he's castrated. It was his nephew, I guess, his nephew Ninurta, who's called Ninurta, who castrated him through that book. I forget the name. There's a book that shows the story. These contests go on for over 80 years, and Ra continues to deny Horus his right to the throne. Meanwhile, the land is suffering under Set's rule, and Isis is desperate to do something to help her son and her people. She transforms herself into a beautiful young woman and sits down in front of Set's palace, where she begins to cry. When Set comes out and sees her, he asks the cause of her sorrow, and she tells him how a wicked man, her husband's own brother, has killed him and has taken his land, and father seeks the life of her own son, and has banished her to the swamp lands and the thickets where only the scorpions are her companions. She is outraged by her story and declares that this man should be punished. He swears that he himself will go find this man and cast him from the lands, and restore the woman and her child to their rightful place. Isis then throws off her disguise and reveals herself and the other gods in attendance. Set has condemned himself by his own decree, and Ra agrees with the other gods that Horus should be king. Set is then banished to the desert lands beyond Egypt's borders, while Horus assumes the throne of his father, with his mother and aunt Nephthys as consorts. Oof. So how beautiful now! The son become the mothers and the auntie lover. How terrible! In another version of the story, the trial lasts for 80 years until the frustrated gods turn to the wise goddess Deity, mediator of these paths, who rules in favor of Horus. She suggests that Set be given reign of the desert regions, while Horus rules the fertile Nile River Valley. As a consolation, she proposes Set should also be given 2 foreigner goddesses as consorts: the warrior goddess Anna from Syria and Astarte, the queen of heaven from Phoenicia. This version of the story explained how Set came to be associated with people of foreigner lands as well as the desert regions. Horus and the king. Having conquered Set and restored order, Horus became known as the Horus-Sematawi, the Horus uniter of the two lands. He restated the policies of his parents, rejuvenating the land, and ruled wisely. It is for this reason that kings of Egypt from the 4th dynastic period on aligned themselves with Horus and chose a Horus name to rule under at the coronation. Osiris had been the first king of Egypt, established the order, and then passed it on to the underworld, while Horus was the king who restored that order after it was overturned by Set, and who raised Egypt up from chaos to harmony. Egyptian kings therefore identified themselves with Horus in life and Osiris in death. During their reign, they were the physical manifestation of Horus under the protection of Isis. A notable departure from this custom being the king Perisen, 60th king of the second dynasty, who aligned himself clearly set. Ramesses II famously invokes the protection of Isis, and Horus is the poem of Pentateuch following the Battle of Kadesh. The main other kings and pharaohs of Egypt within right, Horus directly linked with the kingship of Egypt in both his falcon form aspect and as the son of Isis. From the earliest dynastic period, the king's name was written in the rectangular device known as the serek, which depicted the horse falcon perched on a stylized palace enclosure, and which seems to indicate the king as mediator between the heaven and earthly realms. If not the god manifest within the palace, since the king himself to these Horus names of the monarch. Other titles were later added, including the golden horse name, in which a divine falcon is depicted upon the hieroglyphic sign for gold. Since the king of Egypt was the great house who protected his people, so the house of Al, so he was called Balsa after all, who protected his people. All the citizens of Egypt were under the protection of Horus. He was worshipped in many forms and in many different sites. Wilson notes that Horus was worshipped along with other deities in many Egyptian temples. An important site of his worship are known from one end of Egypt to another. His importance as the uniter of the two lands and maintainer of order made him a representation of the concept of balance, which was highly valued by the Egyptians. Horus was worshipped in the same way as any of the other gods of Egypt. Temples were rebuilt as homes for the god, and his statue placed within the inner sanctum, where only the chief priests was allowed to attend him. The clergy of the Horus cult were always male, as they associated themselves with Horus and claimed protection from their mother Isis. Attendant priests took care of the temple complex, which, like any other, was construction to mirror the afterlife of the field of the reeds. Could this Horus also be the Jesus and his mother Mary be the Isis? The refreshing pool of the temple was Lily Lake, also known as the Lake of Flowers, which the soul of the justified dead were rowed across by the divine ferryman Raphael, he who looks behind himself. The temple was the afterlife palace and home of the god, and the courtyard, decorated with flowers, was his garden. The people of Egypt would come to the courtyard to ask for assistance or to receive alms. They leave donations or have their dreams interpreted. They would also visit the temple for advice, interpretation of omens, medical assistance, marriage counseling, and for protection from evil spirits or ghosts. Oh, so this deity was very, very useful, very benign. The sites of the worship of Horus, as Wilson notes above, are too numerous to list, but the major cult center were Kem and the Delta regions, where Horus was hidden as a child. P, the site where Horus lost his eye in his battle with Set, and Pd, both in the Delta and Upper Egypt. He was worshipped along with Hathor and their son Harsomptos at Efu and Cum-Ombos. Efu hosted the annual coronation of the sacred falcon, and which an actual falcon was selected to represent the god as king of all Egypt, thus uniting the ancient falcon god with his form as Horus, son of Osiris, and with the king. The ceremony is like another royal festival had to do with the empowerment of the king and the rejuvenation of his reign. That was not as important as the Heb said festival. Horus was venerated at Abu Simbel through statuary and inscription amulets were regularly worn by people seeking his protection. Talk about what they call polytheism, what idolatry. The four sons of Horus. This protection extends through life and beyond the death. Horus was associated with afterlife through his four sons who protected the vital organs of the deceased. Need to protect vital organs of the dead people for what? These four gods represented the four cardinal points of the compass, and each one is presided over and protected by a goddess. The four sons of Horus were Duamute, a jackal god who protected the stomach, represented the east and was protected by Neti. Hapi, a baboon god who protected the lungs, represented the north and was protected by Nephthys. Imseti, a god in human form who protected the liver, represented the south and was protected by Isis. Kebe Senue, a hawk god who protected the intestines. Oh, I needed that. Represented the west and was protected by Selket. And also the same form that they protect, they could be responsible for having problem with all those vital organs in the heart. Who are in charge of the heart? Protect the stomach, protect by Neti, lungs, Hapi, baboon god. The jackal god protects the stomach. A baboon god protects the lungs. Insecti god in human form protects the liver. And the bed god protects the intestine. Ooh. These organs were held in canopic jars, which sometimes had the head of the protector god as the lead handle. The most famous example of the canopic protectors is the alabaster artifact from the tomb of Tutankhamun, in which Isis, Nephthys, and Selke are carved. All four of the protector gods were depicted as mummified man with their respective different heads of jackal, baboon, human, and hawk. These were all seen as manifestation of Horus, who was a friend to the dead. Horus was invoked at funerals for protection and guidance for those who had departed, and for the living who remained behind. The cult of Horus in Egypt. See, Jesus and Horus controversy, as in noted, was already ancient by the time the Osiris myth became popular, and the myth elevated the worship of Osiris, Isis, and Horus to a national level. The cult of Isis became so popular that worship of the goddess traveled through trade to Greece and then to Rome, where it became the greatest challenge to the new religion of Christianity. And the 5th century CE, Horus traveled with her in the form of Horus, the child, and influenced the Christian iconography. You see, of the Virgin Mary and the Christ child. See how I knew it? There is no doubt the worship of Isis influenced early Christianity through the concept of the dying and a reviving God who returns from the dead. I knew it. I knew it already. Who protects from the dead, returns from the dead to bring life to the people. Eternal life through dedication to their God. The image of the Virgin Mother and Child, and even the ready. But he was not a virgin. Where Isis was a virgin, since when? Even the ready who and characteristic of the Christian devil. This is not to say, however, that Christianity is simply the Isis cult repackaged, nor that the Horus was the prototype for the risen Christ. Who knows? And that Catholic worship also those feline entities, those Catholic, and they have something to do with all this Hathor and all this Bastet um, deities in ancient religion, mythology. The book The Pagan Christ by Tom Harpur makes this very claim, however, and has given rise to the so-called Horus Jesus controversy, also known as the Son of God controversy. Harpur claims that Christianity was invented wholly from Egyptian mythology and that Jesus Christ is simply Horus reimagined. To support his claim, Harpur cites experts on the subject such as Geoffrey Higgins, Gerald Massey, all right from the 18th century Atlantis. English believe all religions came from the lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis was in America and Europe. Massey, a self-styled Egyptologist, was an English spiritualist who studied the available inscription at the British Museum Cone as a self-professed tour. Eternal life. Harpur book represents never various problem to any reader according to Bible Christianity. Harpur said that both Horus and Jesus were born in a cave. This is false. Horus was born in the delta swamps and Jesus in a stable. Both births were announced by an angel. Also false, as the concept of the angel, message of God, is absent from Egyptian belief. Horus and Jesus were both baptized. False. Baptism was not practiced by Egyptians. Both Horus and Jesus were tempted in the wilderness. False. Horus battled Seth in many different regions, including the arid desert, while the gospel stories make clear that Jesus was tempted in the desert of the wilderness. Horus and Jesus were both visited by three wise men. False. Horus never visited by wise men, and even more damaging to Harpur's scholarship, there are not three wise men mentioned in the Bible, which only refers to wise men who bring three kinds of gifts. Horus and Jesus both raised the dead back to life. False. Horus had nothing to do with raising Osiris or anyone else from the dead. Yeah, but Osiris come out from the dead, so further Egyptian religious belief would have rejected any consequences of the dead person returned to life on earth. Even Osiris, the great god and first king, was not allowed to return to his place on earth after death. He took his place among the dead where he belonged. The Egyptian understanding of earthly life was that it was only one part of a much longer internal journey, and no one would have been welcomed back who had already departed for the afterlife. Further, no Egyptian would have wanted to. The Egyptian afterlife was a mirror image of one's life on earth, except it lacked disappointment, loss, and death. Any person or object one had left behind on earth was found again in the field of reeds, whether one's deceased loved ones, pets, or even one's favorite tree in one's yard. That's a replica, hologram replica. All of the Harpo father claims and the Anunnakis has power to resurrect the dead, their family dead, when they die. All of Harpo's father claims are equally untenable. Horus was the enemy of health and humans and their earthly form, not of souls needing salvation from sin and eternal punishment. Horus the child was one of a number of so-called child gods of ancient Egypt who appeared in the form they were Anunnaki, parents to the creations, prince, vanquish crocodile. Horus child tramples on crocodiles, squeezes the life out of other dangerous creatures such as snakes, lions, and antelopes. Oh! When the Greeks saw such objects, they identified Horus, the child of Hippocrates, the infant Hercules, who strangled two snakes that attacked him in his cradle. Horus also, through his four sons, watched over and was a friend to the dead, but was primarily a god of the living. He was the distant god who could draw close in time of need, the dependable friend, the caring brother, the protector, and one's guide through the perils of life. He shares these qualities and characteristics with other deities and cultures around the world up through the present day, but to the Egyptian, he was wholly unique because he was their own, as it is and has always been, if any god of any faith anywhere. Very interesting story, mythology, whatever. That's Horus, battle with Anubis.